My name is Walter Briggs, and I have been a retired mail carrier for 6 years now. For 31 years, I walked the same routes in Clover Hill, Virginia. I knew which dogs barked and which ones bit. I knew which porches flooded in March. I knew the sound a screen door makes when it hasn't been oiled since the last administration. When you spend 3 decades reading a neighborhood, you develop a kind of instinct. You notice when something is off before you can name what it is. I tell you that because I want you to understand that what I'm about to share with you didn't start with fear. It started with something quieter than fear. It started with a feeling you get in the back of your teeth when a house that's always had lights on is suddenly dark. My daughter Renee calls me every Thursday evening, has done it since she moved to Garrett County, Maryland, with her husband Dennis nearly 9 years ago, 7 o'clock on the nose, without fail. Even when she had a stomach bug so bad she could barely sit upright, she called. Even the Thursday after her mother's funeral, she called. And we talked for 2 hours, with both of us crying so hard we could barely understand each other. That phone call every Thursday is as fixed in my life as sunrise. The first Thursday she didn't call, I told myself she was busy. I called her cell. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I left a message, just a short one, the kind you leave when you're not worried yet but you want her to know you called. I made myself a cup of coffee and watched the news and went to bed. The second Thursday I called at 6:30, then at 7, then at 7:15. Each time, voicemail. I called her home number. Same thing. I thought about Dennis. I had never trusted Dennis the way I wanted to trust him. He was the kind of man who smiled with his mouth and not his eyes. But Renee loved him, and she was a grown woman, and I told myself to stay in my lane. On Friday morning I called again, then Saturday. On Sunday, her son Marcus called me from his own phone. He was 9 years old, and his voice was the smallest thing I'd ever heard come through a telephone line. "Grandpa," he said, "I don't know where Mom is. I want you to understand what it feels like to hear those words from a 9-year-old boy. I want you, if you have a grandchild, if you have a child, to sit with that for just one moment. I don't know where Mom is," said so quietly that I had to press the phone hard against my ear to be sure I'd heard him right. "Marcus," I said, and I kept my voice very steady because I needed him to stay calm. "Where are you right now, son?" "In my room," he said. I locked my door. "Is Dennis in the house?" A pause, long enough that my heart dropped 3 floors. "He was," Marcus said. "He left this morning. He said he was going to work." "And your mom?" Another pause. "Then, I heard her leave 2 nights ago. There was yelling. Then the door. Then nothing." I was already on my feet. I had the phone to my ear, and I was moving through my house, looking for my keys, before I'd even fully decided to drive to Maryland. My body had decided. My body had been a mail carrier for 31 years, and it knew when something was wrong with a house on its route. "Marcus," I said, "I need you to stay in your room with that door locked. Can you do that for me?" "Yes, sir." "Do you have food in there?" "I have crackers and a juice box from my backpack." Good boy, Marcus. I am going to call someone to check on you right now, and then I am going to get in my truck and drive to you. It's going to take me about 3 hours. Can you be brave for 3 hours?" He said he could. I hung up and I called 911. "I want to stop here because I know some of you are going to say, and you'd be right to say it, Walter, why didn't you call 911 on day 1? And the honest answer is that I didn't have enough. I had a missed phone call, and a son-in-law I didn't like, and a feeling in the back of my teeth. That's not nothing, but it's not enough. The morning Marcus called me, I had a 9-year-old boy alone in a locked room not knowing where his mother was. That was enough. The Garrett County Sheriff's dispatcher was a woman with a voice like river gravel, calm and steady. I gave her Renee's address on Millstone Road. I told her my grandson was alone in the house, that my daughter had been unreachable for days, that her husband had left that morning. She told me a deputy would do a welfare check within the hour. She took my phone number. She told me to drive carefully. I drove anything but carefully. I drove the way I imagine fathers have driven since the invention of the automobile, too fast, hands tight on the wheel, eyes on the road but mind somewhere far ahead of the headlights. I called Marcus twice during the drive. The first time, around the halfway mark, he answered on the second ring. "Deputy came," he said. "Lady officer. She's real nice. She's sitting in the kitchen." "Good," You doing okay? I'm hungry. Tell the deputy you're hungry, Marcus. I already did. She's making me a sandwich. The second time I called, about 40 minutes out, he didn't answer. I told myself the deputy was with him. I told myself he was fine. I drove faster anyway. I pulled onto Millstone Road just before 2 in the afternoon. The house was a tan vinyl-sided colonial on a half-acre lot. One of those houses that looks like every other house on the street until you know what you're looking for. I had been here a dozen times. I had sat at that kitchen table. I had watched football in that living room with Dennis, who spoke too loud during commercials and went quiet during the actual game. I had pushed Marcus on the tire swing in the backyard until my arms gave out. I knew this house, and the moment I turned into the driveway, I knew something was wrong with it. The curtains on the front windows were all pulled shut. Renee never pulled her front curtains shut. She liked natural light, she'd told me that 100 times. Laughed at herself for how much it mattered to her. I just need to see outside, Dad. Every window dark and closed. There was a sheriff's cruiser in the driveway. I parked behind it and was out of my truck before the engine stopped ticking. The deputy met me at the front door. Young woman, early 30s, dark hair pulled back. Her name tag said Callahan. She shook my hand in a way that told me she had been doing this job long enough to know how to shake the hand of a scared father. Mr. Briggs, she said, your grandson is okay. He's in the kitchen. I've been with him. My daughter? I said. Deputy Callahan's expression shifted in a way that I had spent 31 years of mail delivery learning to read. It was the expression of someone who is about to tell you something they wish they didn't have to tell you. We haven't located her yet, she said. We've put out a call. We're trying to reach her husband. I went inside. Marcus was sitting at the kitchen table with a half-eaten peanut butter sandwich and a glass of milk. He looked up when I came in, and his face did something that I am not going to be able to describe to you accurately, because what it did was collapse the distance between 9 years old and 2 years old in a single second. He was a little boy, and his mother was gone, and his grandfather had just walked through the door, and every wall he'd been holding up for 2 days came down at once. I crossed the kitchen in 3 steps, and I pulled him into me, and I held him there. I got you, I said. I got you, buddy. I got you. He didn't cry out loud. He just pressed his face into my shoulder and shook. 9 years old, and he had spent 2 days alone in a locked room with crackers and a juice box, listening for his father's footsteps in the hallway, waiting for something he couldn't name. Deputy Callahan gave us a minute. Then she came back to the table and sat down, and she asked Marcus to walk us through the last few days. She had a small notebook, but she barely used it. She just listened. Marcus told us, in the way that children tell things out of order, doubling back, getting stuck on small details that things had been bad for a while. He used that word, bad. He said there was a lot of yelling at night after he went to bed. He said one morning he came downstairs and his mother had a bruise under her eye, and she told him she'd walked into the bathroom cabinet in the dark. He said he didn't believe her. He said he started keeping his backpack packed, the way she'd told him to once, a long time ago, when he'd asked her what they should do if there was ever a fire. She'd told him to keep important things where he could grab them fast. He hadn't asked what kind of fire she meant. He said that 3 nights ago, a Thursday, I registered that like a physical blow he heard them fighting downstairs, and then he heard his mother make a sound he'd never heard her make before. And then there was quiet. And then he heard the front door. He'd waited until morning to come out of his room. His father was asleep on the couch. His mother wasn't in the house. He didn't ask Dennis where she was. He told us that very calmly. He said, I didn't ask him because I didn't think he'd tell me the truth. 9 years old. Deputy Callahan stepped outside to make a call. I stayed with Marcus. We sat at the kitchen table and I held his hand and neither of us said much. And outside the window, the afternoon light was flat and gray over the back field, and the tire swing turned slowly in a wind neither of us could feel through the glass. I don't know exactly what I was thinking in those minutes. I know I was thinking about Renee. I was thinking about the drive she used to take with me on Saturdays when she was small, riding in the mail truck, sorting circulars into bundles. I was thinking about how she used to call the neighbors' dogs by the names I made up for them. I was thinking about her voice on the phone every Thursday at 7 o'clock, reliable as a tide. I was thinking about the Thursday she didn't call, and how I'd told myself she was busy. Deputy Callahan came back inside. She sat down across from me. Mr. Briggs, she said, we found your daughter. I held very still. She's at Garrett Regional Medical Center. She was admitted Thursday night. She's— a pause, brief and careful. She's stable. She has a broken wrist and 2 cracked ribs and some other injuries. She's been asking for you. I have been in some difficult moments in my life. I stood beside my wife Margaret's hospital bed in her final hours. I buried my father. I have had hard moments, but there was something about hearing the word stable after 2 days of not knowing that made my legs go unreliable underneath me, and I had to put my hand flat on the kitchen table to hold myself upright. "Can I take my grandson?" I said. "Let me make a call," Deputy Callahan said. It took about 20 minutes. There were forms. There were phone calls. There was a children's services caseworker who spoke with Marcus briefly, kindly, and who spoke with me longer. Dennis had not come home. His phone was going to voicemail. A warrant was being prepared. Deputy Callahan walked us out to my truck. Marcus had his backpack on. He hadn't taken it off since I arrived. I realized. He'd been ready to go since before I got there. "Your grandfather's going to take you to see your mom," Callahan told him. Marcus nodded like this was a fact he'd already decided was true. She looked at me over the top of his head. "You did the right thing calling us first," she said. I thought about the 48 hours I hadn't called. I didn't say that out loud. The hospital was 22 minutes from the house. Marcus sat in the passenger seat with his backpack in his lap and his eyes forward, and he asked me one question the whole drive. "Is she going to be okay?" "Yes," I said, and I believed it. I needed to believe it, and I believed it. "Is she going to come home?" I thought about what to say to that. I thought about the curtains pulled shut, and the tire swing turning in the gray afternoon, and the crackers and juice box in a 9-year-old's backpack. "Not to that house," I said. "But yes, she's going to come home." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Good. I didn't like that house anyway." We found Renee in a room on the 2nd floor. There was a small window with a view of the parking lot and the Appalachian Hills beyond it, soft and green in the distance. She was sitting up in the bed, her right wrist in a brace, her left side taped under her hospital gown. Her face was a thing I am not going to describe in detail, because she is my daughter, and some things are between a father and his child. I will tell you that she looked at me when I came through the door, and something in her that had been locked for a long time came unlocked. Marcus went to her first. He climbed up on the bed beside her, careful of her wrist, and tucked himself under her good arm, and she bent her head over his and closed her eyes. I stood in the doorway and gave them that. Then I pulled a chair up to the bed and I took her left hand in both of mine and I sat with her. She told me what happened. Not all of it that day. Some of it came out over the following weeks, piece by piece, the way things do when they've been hidden for a long time. But the shape of it was clear enough. Dennis had been escalating for 3 years. Slow at first, the way these things always are, a shove disguised as frustration, a grip on her arm disguised as direction, then faster. She had been planning to leave. She had money saved in an account he didn't know about. She had a bag. She hadn't moved fast enough. Thursday night, the argument started over something small, the way arguments in that kind of house always start over something small, because the small thing is never the real thing. He broke her wrist when she tried to leave through the kitchen. She got to the neighbor's house, a woman named Gloria Hess, 71 years old, who opened her door at 11:30 at night without hesitation and called 911 herself and sat with Renee on her couch until the ambulance came. I am going to remember Gloria Hess for the rest of my life. Renee had asked the hospital not to call me. She told me this with her eyes down, ashamed, and I held her hand tighter so she'd know she didn't need to be. "I didn't want to scare you," she said. "Baby," I said, "I'm your father. Scaring me is your right." She laughed, and then she winced because her ribs didn't like laughing yet. And then Marcus laughed too, and it was the first sound in that room that didn't carry weight. Dennis turned himself in 2 days later. The warrant had been issued. His attorney apparently advised him that disappearing would make things worse. He was charged with second-degree assault and felony domestic violence. He made bail, which I will tell you made me lose a night's sleep, but there was a protective order in place, and I made sure Renee and Marcus were not where he could find them. They came to Clover Hill. Renee slept in the room that had been her room when she was in high school, same blue curtains, though Margaret and I had repainted the walls twice since then. Marcus took the pull-out in the den and complained about it cheerfully, and ate 3 servings of everything I put in front of him for the first week. He had that particular hunger that children get after they've been frightened for a long time and have finally arrived somewhere safe. Like his body was making up for lost time. I've been a mail carrier, and I've been a father, and I've been a husband, and now I'm a widower and a grandfather, and I've learned a few things from all of those. I want to share something with you, if you'll let me. When someone you love stops calling, do not wait. I waited 4 days. I told myself she was busy. I told myself I didn't want to be overbearing. I told myself she was a grown woman with her own life. Every one of those things was true, and every one of them cost me 4 days I will never stop thinking about. I want you to hear this, especially those of you who have a daughter, a son, a sister, a grandchild. Anyone who calls you on a regular schedule. Anyone whose presence in your life is a rhythm you've come to rely on. When that rhythm breaks, when the call doesn't come, when the text goes unanswered, when the front curtains that are always open are suddenly pulled shut, trust that feeling in the back of your teeth. You have earned that instinct. It is not paranoia. It is love with experience behind it. And call someone. Call the police if you need to. Let them think you're overreacting. Let them do the wellness check. Let it turn out to be nothing. Nothing is the best outcome you could possibly hope for, and it costs you nothing but a little embarrassment. Nothing would have been the greatest gift. Renee still calls me every Thursday, 7 o'clock, same as before. Sometimes Marcus gets on the line and tells me about his soccer games or a book he's reading for school or something funny that happened at lunch. Last Thursday, he told me he'd joined the school newspaper. He wants to be a writer. I told him that writers notice things. They pay attention to what's around them. They remember the details other people let go. He said, "Like you, Grandpa, you always notice everything." I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. I thought about the curtains. I thought about the Thursday phone call that didn't come. I thought about a 9-year-old boy with a packed backpack and crackers in the zipper pocket, waiting to be found by someone who knew how to read the signs. I thought about 31 years of walking the same routes, learning the same houses, knowing in my body when something about a door or a window or a front porch was wrong. Some things you learn from a job, some things you learn from love. The best things you learn from both at once. If someone you love has gone quiet, don't you make the same mistake I did. Don't wait for a reason that feels big enough. Don't wait until you're sure. The people who hurt the ones we love are counting on us to wait. They are counting on us to feel like we're overstepping. They have built their whole operation on our reluctance to make a scene. Make the scene. Call. Drive. Knock on the door. Ask the uncomfortable questions. Be the parent, or the grandparent, or the brother, or the friend who shows up when showing up was not invited. Renee didn't ask me to come. She hadn't been able to ask me to come. That's the thing about these situations that people outside of them don't always understand. The people inside don't always call for help because the person they're afraid of has spent years teaching them that. Calling for help has a price. My grandson called me instead. A 9-year-old boy in a locked room with a juice box and a packed backpack called his grandfather because he'd run out of other options. And his grandfather got in a truck and drove 3 hours and called the sheriff on the way. That's all it was. And if you've watched this far, if you've sat with me through this whole story, I think you already know what I'm going to say next. And I think you're already thinking about someone in your own life. Call them. Don't wait for Thursday.